All right. So welcome to everybody in the audience and to our guests, Deborah Smith Gregory, Dina Sayedamed, who is unfortunately stuck in air travel traffic, Lawrence Hamm, Rosa Clemente, and Kelly Harris, and members of the Public Square team, and of course, my amazing 2024 community journalism classmates, whom you will all hear from today. My name is Zoe Van Gelder. I'm a senior reporter with Public Square Amplified. I joined the newsroom almost 2 years ago, and it's been one of the most rigorous spaces for political education, writing, community organizing, and overall the study and practice of journalism, both in and of itself and as a tool of civic education. I'm really proud of all the work that we're doing here to deepen our commitment to using emancipatory journalism as a framework for our explanatory news writing and our multimedia production. So today we're going to continue this work by using our Public Square platform to bring the community, journalists, activists, academics, and civic leaders into a conversation on the current political times and landscape. Public Square Amplified is a digital space for the community to gather and to even grapple with the challenges on the road to liberation. We believe that the current political times demand of us rigorous debate and exchange. Democracy demands it, and journalism is the tool for that. We believe to do it. And today we will try to do a bit of that. So I would first like to introduce Deborah Smith Gregory, our moderator for the 2024 Community Journalism Programs Town Hall, sponsored by the New Jersey Civic Information Consortium, to lead us in the local view in the national context. Her roots in the New Jersey's Black press run very deep. In 1987, she was named the first woman editor of the New Jersey Afro-American, the youngest of the story's Afro-American newspaper chain. She replaced Robert Queen, the NJ Afro's legendary editor, after he had retired. As the NJ Afro editor and staff reporter before that, she covered local events, including the 1986 election of Sharpay James in the city's second Black mayor, and the New Jersey's delegation of the 1988 Democratic National Convention, the site of the culmination of Jesse Jackson Sr.'s historic run for president that year. She subsequently became the New Jersey editor of the Afro's Red Star edition, emerging of the New Jersey, Richmond, Virginia, and North and South Carolina Afros. It was an attempt by the Afro-American newspaper company to create a Black equivalent of USA Today. She held that position until the Red Star folded in 1988, and right after that, in 1989, she became the founding editor-in-chief of Prospectus Magazine, a monthly periodical that served Black New Jerseyans, and she's held that post until that magazine folded in the mid-1990s. So again, thank you, everyone, and thank you, Ms. Smith. I now pass it on to you.
Thank you. Thank you, and welcome everyone on this Saturday morning, this beautiful August 3rd Saturday morning, to this very important conversation. We are experiencing a seismic change. It is occurring on all fronts. It is occurring personally, it is occurring politically, community, and it has everyone in a flux. We all say to one another that we're going through something, and it's a lot going on. And truly, there is a lot going on. And we get to, as journalists, examine what's going on and to present information that the community can use to make informed decisions. So what is going on right now with us is that here in New Jersey, we have a leadership change with the passing of Congressional District 10, Donald Payne Jr., there will be a new congressman or woman. With the ascension of U.S. Congressman Andy Kim running for Senate, there will be a new congressperson in South Jersey as well, and a new senator. And then with the recent conviction of Senator Bob Menendez, there will be an appointment of a new senator. So there is a lot going on, and that's just right here in New Jersey. If we look nationally at what's happening with national politics, the idea that there may be the first female, the first Black, the first Asian to serve in the White House is astounding and stunning at this point. The Magnum movement of um, the former president, who has also been convicted but not put in jail, makes it where people are confused. That's where the journalists come in to make sure that the information is factual and not misinformation as so many of us get on social media. We must be the trumpeters, if you will, to say these are the facts. It's not what you feel, what you heard. If you heard something, make sure that you do your own personal research to understand that it is facts. The Project 2025, so many people have been talking about it. And the responsibility of the journalist is to make sure that we have a full understanding. So just recently, the Wall Street Journal did an infographic, about an 8-minute infographic on Project 2025. It is very well done. And those are the kinds of work that journalists get to do, to be current, to be factual, and to inform our community, both locally, regionally, nationally, and because of social media, internationally. So I am excited to talk to our panelists this morning about all of this. And then we've had some transitions also. We're losing people that have been longtime leaders, such as the late Sheila Jackson Lee, who just passed away after so many years of service, and even with the passing of Congressman Payne. So this is change is happening. Like Sam Cooke said, a change is going to come. Change is going to come. Now, where do we fit in the 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 shift as storytellers, truth tellers? Where do we fit in? And so we have some questions. We have some exciting guests, and we have some questions to ask of them. Um, I I assure you that each one of them will leave you with gems, pearls of wisdom, gems of knowledge that you can take with you, you can use. You should research more of the people who are going to be speaking because they are prolific. So they have things all over social media, YouTube. You can find them so that you can get even more familiar. We don't have enough time. We don't have the entire day to get to know each one of them. But what I would like to do is to give you a brief introduction about each one of them. And I'm going to start with the people that I see on camera. I see Rosa Alicia Clemente, and she is an award-winning organizer, speaker, public commentator, producer, independent journalist, we need more of, scholar activist, and former vice presidential candidate in 2008. Clemente made her story when she became the first Afro-Latina to run for first vice president of the United States on the Green Party ticket with her running mate, Cynthia McKinney. To this day, they are the only two women of color that ticket in the U.S. presidential history up to today. She is the creator of Know Thyself Productions, under which she has organized multiple national tours. It is a nonprofit dedicated to combating anti-Blackness within the wider Latinx community. And that is certainly something a question for me to ask you about. Recently, she was also the associate producer for the 2021 Oscar-winning biographical drama film Judas and the Black Messiah. And if you have not seen it, you need to. It is a very important piece of work. She is currently completing her PhD at the W.B. Du Bois Center at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. I see Larry Hamm, and Larry has been involved in every major social movement in the state for the last 50 years. He is a graduate of Princeton University. He was part of the student leadership cadre that held a major campus anti-apartheid protest in the 1970s, years before the anti-apartheid movement became dominant on the American campus. But that pioneer spirit that he had was influential in the noticing of the larger community, the larger American space needing to do something. He founded the People's Organization for Progress, also known as POP, in 1983. It is an independent grassroots organization. They are not afraid to endorse people, controversial people that we would say, oh, why? Because they feel that they need to take a stand with people who are working for the community. He has become a recognized leader in New Jersey's anti-apartheid and Million Man March movement. And I am remembering when he led an effort of 381 consecutive days of protest. 381 consecutive days in the rain. You think yesterday was hot? They were standing outside in 100-degree weather, protesting. For 381 days, they did that. That is a testament to commitment, a testament to I am going to stand for what I believe in. And he certainly made news with that. And so now whenever people see pop shirts, they honk their horns, because at that time it was honk for justice. And people honk their horns wherever they see a massive yellow shirt, they honk their horns. I'm not sure if Dr. Kelly is on, but I am going to introduce him because I know that he will be coming on. Kelly Harris holds a PhD in political science from Clark Atlanta University and an MA in Black Studies from the Ohio State University and a BA in African American Studies from Temple University. A Philly native, Kelly was associate professor of African American Studies at Chicago State University prior to serving as Director of Africana Studies at Seton Hall, my alma mater. I was so happy that he was there. Kelly has tremendous experience rebuilding Africana Studies programs. He also remains an active researcher with scholarly interest at the intersection of African politics, globalization, and neoliberal development, and an emerging interest in 19th century social scientists. And our welcome, Dr. Kelly. And our last presenter is Miss Dina Sayedamed. And I hope when she comes on, if I have not said her name correctly, her last name, that she does correct me. Sayedamed is a Juris Doctor candidate at Rutgers University School of Law. Before pivoting into the legal field, Dina produced Mahdi Hassan and Mark Lamont Hill's news analyst videos at Al Jazeera, Al Jazeera English and The Intercept, which focused on state surveillance and U.S. foreign policy. She's also a breaking news producer at CBS News and the lead producer on Amnesty International's first Arabic language podcast. Dina is also a community leader and organizer, having served as CARE New Jersey's media manager. There, she manipulated media tools. She held press conferences. She did multimedia work and featured news pieces to lead the conversation and understanding on Islam and Muslims in New Jersey. And so I want to welcome you to our panel. And we're going to jump right in because there's so much to talk about. And so I think that I want to start with, um, hmm, I want to start with this, and this is for everyone. What do you want to see happen as this election season is unfolding, with the campaigns as we move to Labor Day and beyond? What do you want to see the media's role? What do you want to see the community receive as a result of, um, I guess, well, I want to say that there's a difference between the media and the press. What type of coverage would you like to see? What would you like to see happen? We're coming up on the Democratic convention. We just left the Republican convention. What type of news information would you like to see going forward? And I'll start with Rosa.
Hi everybody. That people stop being afraid of third parties and fear mongering, because that's happening in all circles, even like the left and the progressives, right? Like every day, and it's almost always Democrats. Like the Democrats sue third parties more to keep us off the ballot. The Republicans just they don't even really pay attention in that way, but the visceral attacks right now, especially after Vice President Harris became the presumptive nominee against Dr. West and Melina Abdullah. And then I need to change my bio because now I'm not the only Afro-Latina woman, because on the Party for Socialism and Liberation is Claudia de la Cruz, a dope sister, Afro-Dominicana, and her running mate, Karina. So I love now that we have had two ballots, right, in 2008 to now. Yeah. And it's not frustrating, but I always feel like, why would people vote out of fear? If we want to be a democracy, why can't we have more parties? But I think the best thing that I'm seeing from a lot of young people now are really challenging the duopoly, right? There's people who know they might withhold their vote, or what we have seen from Palestinian people about uncommitted. So I think like young people are bringing really innovative ways and are looking for a different option. So I wish people would, think not just on emotion. I mean, me and Cynthia ran against Obama and Biden, right? Like that was very, very difficult. And now 16 years later, we haven't really moved that much in third parties, and people don't understand why we continue to run, because if we don't run, we'll never get that 5% of the entire vote. So if by some chance we would get 5% of the electorate, whether it's the Party for Socialism, Liberation, the Green Party, the Libertarian Party, we would be on the ballot. So I would like to see more journalists like dig into that and really see where young people are coming from, and again, like stop the fear mongering and the hate, because it's coming mostly from the left right now, at those of us who are on third party candidates or ran previously on the third party ballot.
Okay. Fear mongering. Larry, what do you think should be the type of coverage, and what would you like to see going forward, as this election is like, what are we, like, not 90 days in. How would you like to see it covered in a manner that is productive and empowering to voters?
Well, I think first and foremost, there must be a focus on policy and less focus on personality. I think right now the media is caught up. I mean, we've been through a lot even to get where we are right now. I mean, your opening remarks were very relevant about this being an extraordinary period that we're in. In fact, although other presidents did not run for reelection or were assassinated and couldn't run for reelection or dropped out for a host of reasons, I think this was actually the first election where a president who had won all the primaries either dropped out or were forced out. Some people call it a coup, you know, and that was highly unusual. And now we're in a situation where the first woman and woman of African American and South Asian heritage could become the president of the United States. And very much, Rosa mentioned Obama's election. This is very much like that. It's almost like Obama Redux, where Obama was going to be the first Black president of the United States, and everyone focused on that. The same thing is now happening, but it's happening at hyperspeed. Because remember, President Obama, he had to go through all the primary process and all of that. Here we had a switch out, you know, where the president was switched out for the vice president, and now she has 90 days to wage a campaign to defeat the Republican nominee, Donald Trump. So there's this focus on Kamala Harris being the first possible woman president, the first woman of color to be the Democratic Party nominee for president, and hardly any focus on policy. I mean, and this is intentional. This is not accidental, because if we focus on policy, then people have to look critically at what's going on. And Kamala Harris's record deserves critique. You know, we should not be lemmings, you know, just following along simply because this is the first person. And all we have to do is reflect on our experience with former President Obama. I mean, should we have had, I mean, was it a good thing to have a first Black president? Yes, it was. It was a blow against racism. But there were a lot of negatives too. I mean, and foremost, foremost in my mind is the destruction of Libya. I mean, even though it was so ghastly, even Obama, I think, had to comment on it in his latest biography. But the same thing is happening here. And, you know, I'm particularly concerned about Gaza. I'm particularly concerned about the need for a policy shift. Vice President Harris has said some things that seem to make her different, but, you know, President Biden has said some things. You know, he started out one way, and, you know, by April, after intensive protests in the United States and all around the world, even he was trying to co-opt the phrase ceasefire. So we have to move beyond good language or nice sounding language and actually begin to look at policy. The other thing I would like to see, I'd like to see more media focus on the uncommitted delegates at the Democratic National Convention. During the primary period, there was, you know, an uncommitted movement that started, I believe, in Michigan and Detroit. It kind of grew out of I believe, the Abandon Biden movement, where people were running as uncommitted delegates, not committed to any Democratic Party candidate as a way to put pressure on the party and on the president to change course with regard to this destructive genocidal war of extermination that's going on against the Palestinians right now. So what happened, 700,000 people in primaries across the country voted uncommitted. There are going to be 30 delegates at the Democratic National Convention that are uncommitted. When I ran for U.S. Senate here in New Jersey, I supported, I was the only one of the Senate candidates who supported the uncommitted movement. And Jersey will have two, because there were about 48,000 people in New Jersey that voted uncommitted, and that is going to yield two of those 30 delegates. The delegates have made some demands. They've demanded that, I believe one of the Palestinian doctors who has worked in the living hell of Gaza, made by Israel's constant bombing and attacks in that area. They want him to be able to address the Democratic National Convention. They would like to have a delegate address one of the uncommitted delegates address the Democratic National Convention, and they want a meeting between Harris and the delegates. I support those demands, and I think the press should give more attention to that. The other thing I think the press should give more attention to is the issue of voter registration. This election is going to be as contentious as the election of 2020, if not more so. That's the amazing part. That this situation may actually be worse than what the situation was in 2020. And I think one of the things we need, regardless of who you're going to vote for, what party, what candidate, we need massive voter registration between now and November. I think we have, August, September. We have possibly maybe 75 days or so, 70 to 75 days of voter registration. We should be attempting to register millions of people, at least several million people. Why? Because the right wing people, the Republican Party, MAGA and others, they are purging people, particularly Black people, from the rolls in states in the South and other parts of the country. Hundreds of thousands of people are being purged right now in an attempt of one of the tactics to try to ensure Trump victory in November. So we should be focusing on voter registration. We should be focusing on voter education so that voters do know what the policy differences are between the candidates. And I think that we should be waging a serious, now not a formal campaign, but those of us who believe it is important to vote, we should be waging a serious campaign against this feeling on the part of many, and I understand it. I ain't judging nobody. I understand it, but there's a perception in the Black community and maybe in other communities too that people want to sit this election out. I don't think anybody should sit this election out. I think every person, regardless of who you're going to vote for, you should vote. Everybody, this should be a record voter turnout, just as 2020 was a record voter turnout. I think was 158 million people voted. That's a record turnout for United States of America, although on the other side of the ledger, 100,000 eligible voters did not vote in the election of 2020. So I think we should be waging a campaign for voter registration, voter education, and a campaign to convince people that everybody needs to come out and vote in November.
Okay, so Kelly, you've heard a lot, and there's still more to add to this, because the more we talk about what the media should be doing, the more that we talk about and prick the consciousness of people who are in this field, who are either current journalists or a journalist apprentice. They need to have tools. And so this is what you all are, this is what's being given to the listeners of this discussion. So from your lens, what do you see as things that are needed? And by the way, to what Larry said, the last day to register to vote is October 15th. But what do you see the media needing to do, the role that the media needs to play as we unfold through November 5th?
Well, first, let me thank you for moderating this discussion and for Public Square Amplified for hosting this discussion. I think the fact that Public Square is doing this really gets us to a part of your answer. Independent media needs to be amplified. Particularly, matter of fact, Dr. Burrows reminded me just the other day that so many people are getting their news and information from social media. And not mainstream media anymore. So the CNNs and the Fox News and the MSNBC, they may be popular among a certain part of the electorate, but there's many people who, particularly young voters, who turn to social media to get their information. So I think that independent media has a space there, opportunity there to amplify their voice through social media. So I think that might be a strategy for us to get that out there. Second, I concur with both Sister Clemente and Brother Hamm, particularly about the policy emphasis. One of the things that Trump and the Republicans do, they do a great job of taking all the air out the room. They do a great job of shifting the narrative where you don't focus on policy, where you don't talk about it. Just last weekend I saw Fareed Zakaria discuss it, and which you don't see often. Fareed Zakaria opened his program by talking about the impact of tax cuts of Reagan, Bush, and Trump. And he used a beautiful phrase. He said those tax cuts have led to private opulence and public decay. And that's a beautiful and that's the exact truth. But his also point was, which many people don't understand, people have been, so focused on Biden's age and his cognitive abilities and all that. People have missed his policy. People have missed that he has had the largest infrastructure program since the 1950s, right? Over 56,000 current projects right now in the country, right? Rebuilding cities, attempting to rebuild cities with this infrastructure plan. So that's an important thing. That's a big deal. The fact that so many people, student loans have gone away, that's a big deal. More than any president ever attempted to do and did. That's a big deal, and many people poo-poo it like it doesn't matter. So I think the narrative is shifted so people don't look at that. And Biden and inflation is bad, and his foreign policy, has been disastrous. He hasn't been good in that. So those are things that we need to discuss. But because we don't focus on policy issues, because we don't focus and talk about the facts of the matter and focus on other trivial things, it really does us a disservice. So I think that one of the strategies that we could use is trying to figure out how to use social media and amplify the voices of independent media to really discuss these facts. And last thing, and I'll say this now, I suggested this to a colleague, and they didn't think it was a good time to do it because of the politics around, universities and things of that nature. But there should be, one could organize with the major progressive social media voices and have days where we say, okay, today we're going to talk about this issue, all of us. This is what our social media is going to focus on, this particular issue. So those are strategies that people can use social media in a way that empowers us and changes the narrative and the focus from mainstream media.
So while you're speaking, I have a question, another question of you. We just recently lost Sheila Lee Jackson, and she was really pushing HR 40, and we know that oftentimes legislation dies when people die.
Mm.
If Hakeem Jeffries is elevated, do you see this as a way for HR 40 to continue to live and to try to navigate it through so that it actually becomes something real and not something that we just try to champion?
I just
I
want to
think
say
so.
HR 40 is about reparations, right? The HR 40.
Mhm.
Because people might know. And look, I'm using social media right now, and I already have 150 people on my Instagram. So like you'll see me do this. I'm not trying to be rude.
Okay.
But yeah, because I use social media only because I wasn't trained as a journalist, and I take journalism very seriously in terms of our investigative journalists and people here. Yes, social media, HR 40. Look, I think with losing Sheila Jackson Lee and some of the elders that kept pushing for it, I completely do not believe Hakeem Jeffries is even going to want to do it. He's just not. He's not that. People got to know who he is and how he got into that power position very quickly, right? So I'm not saying other people won't talk about it. I think with so much backlash when we're doing policy that affects our people, the way the right is shutting it down, and even some moderate and liberals, is DI, woke, and what DI, yeah. I mean, even the legislation around it, but I think that's what's happening to try to silence voices like us. The minute someone's like a DEI hire, what are we going to say?
Mhm.
Obviously not. What was DEI anyway? Is diversity for what and for who? Like we came through that as a student. I did in the 90s around multiculturalism, right? Like, and what ended up happening was just kind of watered down. So I do believe that it's important, but I'm not sure any change is going to come from the Congress or to keep pushing HR 40. I just don't see it.
So I'm glad that you thank you for the point of clarification so that our audience is with us and following us. And I maintain though the question because this is my own personal opinion. Um, African Americans were given Juneteenth. I want reparations. They can have the holiday. Give me reparations. Now that's just my own personal opinion. And so I'm going to go back to Kelly and ask, what do you so and I'm glad that she clarified it for sure. But your stand, if you will.
Yeah. That it will continue to live because it doesn't do anything. It says to study. To study. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't cost anything. So there's no reason for them not to do it. Yeah, so there's no cost to it. All reparation, all HR 40 is to study the issue of reparations. So there's no political cost. So yeah, that's why they've been able to do it. That's why they continue to do it. That's why certain Republicans have participated on the panel discussions they've had and all that kind of stuff. So there needs to be something stronger in force. And I know Cobra has pushed for something stronger than HR 40. And that's where the discussion really needs to go. We need to talk about what Cobra has been talking about and on front lines talking about for quite some time. So we got to get past. So it's been studied for a long time. Now we got to get okay. So what are some of the solutions to it?
But even here in New Jersey, there's no an independent organization had to conduct the study. It was not something that was launched by the state. So I hear what you're saying about the studies, but out of studies can't action or shouldn't action come out of study?
No question, because I was talking about at the federal level. Because even in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, we have a reparations commission now that the city council just passed, and that they have now. So I don't want to be dismissive of it. It's important. However, we have to move beyond study and get to action. And I know in certain locales, it's been even harder to get to the point of study. But at the federal level, HR 40 has been up, and they've had these discussions for the last few years on it in terms of studying it. But the bill currently is not going to go anywhere. Finally, on this last point, We know it's not going to go anywhere in the current iteration of Congress. We know that any solutions and is not going to go anywhere through the current iteration of Congress. And I think that that's when we're talking about voter registration and voter education, that we really need to emphasize to voters how important midterm elections are, what's at stake, and not just as a presidential election. Because if we continue to allow voices in Congress to control the House in particular, that's anti-progressive, we're not going to get anything done. So we have to always work on two tracks. And so that's my answer.
So before I leave the conversation, Larry, you know I have to let you weigh. I can't leave this conversation without letting you weigh in.
Well, I find areas of agreement with both Rosa and Dr. Harris. I think HR 40 gives us some insight into the beast that we're dealing with, because Dr. Harris is right. HR 40 is a study commission, but I believe the latest iteration of HR 40 says it is the purpose of the commission is to make recommendations to Congress for remedies. That is, it is actually supposed to, in this study, the end result of the study is supposed to be, these are the measures that need to be taken to make restitution to the descendants of those who were enslaved in this country for the 245 years of chattel slavery in the United States, and even 400 years. Well, the bill doesn't say this, I'm saying it now, 400 of slavery, some 400 years of slavery in what we call the United States today, because enslaved Africans were in colonies in Spain and I believe in South Carolina before 1619. But that's a side note. The point I'm trying to make here is that they don't even want to pass a study commission. See, this is the part that people don't want to bring to light. Yes, it is a study commission, and they don't even want to pass that. Like right now, in New Jersey, we've been campaigning for reparations, and one of the partners in the coalition of this campaign, the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, they had a little campaign going for a minute. Says, say the word reparations, because at the state level, we were also trying to get a reparations commission. They call it, the bill calls it, we got a bill introduced, they call it reparations task force. And the leadership of the Democratic Party constantly wants to rename it. They don't want to call it a reparations task force. They want to call it something else. Now, what a lot of people don't know is that 20 years earlier, in fact, 21 years ago, a reparations bill was introduced in the New Jersey state legislature by Assemblyman Craig Stanley. And they did the same thing 21 years ago. They didn't want Stanley to call his bill a reparations bill. They wanted to call it racial reconciliation, something to that effect. And 21 years later, we done went from the 20th century to 21st century, and they're still doing the same tactic. And the upshot of this is that in New Jersey, this is happening where Democrats have control. The Democrats control state government. They control it all. They have a substantial majority in the Assembly. They have a substantial majority in the state Senate, and they have a Democrat in the governor's office. And we can't get the damn reparations study task force bill out of committee to the floor for a vote. And that's with all Democrats. So I would project that even if we get, and I hope we do, I'm not arguing against it. I mean, I hope we wrench control of the House from the MAGA Republicans right now, from the Trump Republicans right now. But if Democrats get control, we're going to have to struggle against racism in the Democratic Party. Because whether it's opposition from the Democrat, whether it's opposition from Republicans or opposition from Democrats, it's still opposition. You know, right now on HR 40, they have 100 co-sponsors, or at least at the time that Sheila Jackson Lee passed away, I think they had 100 co-sponsors. That's more co-sponsors on the bill than they have ever had before. But there's 211, 212 Democrats in the House of Representatives. So that means there's 100 Democrats, 100 more who are not co-sponsors. And there's the rub, because we're struggling on two fronts. Yes, we're struggling against the fascist Republican Party, but we're struggling against reaction and racism in the Democratic Party too. It's not a one-dimensional kind of fight, you know. And it reminds me, I often think of, because my father was a veteran in World War II, and in trying to learn more about that, I learned about how Black people had this double campaign during World War II. I think, hey, Kelly, you're the historian here, help me with this. I think it was called the Double V campaign, where they wanted the slogan was victory. This was Black people, victory against the fascists, but victory against Jim Crow in America.
Victory at home and victory abroad.
That's right. That's right. It was a double. We've always had this double fight going on. It's not just a fight. Even during the Civil War, the Union Army was the engine to destroy the slavocracy in the South, but Black soldiers in the Union had to struggle against racism in the Union Army. They didn't get double pay. They didn't get equal pay. They didn't get weapons that worked. They didn't get full uniforms. Sometimes they didn't even get boots to march, but they fought anyway. You know, in New Jersey, there's a cemetery called African Cemetery. It's in Pennington, New Jersey. They already had a cemetery in Jersey. Why did the Black people have to put their little money together and get another cemetery? Because the white Union soldiers and the Black Union soldiers couldn't be buried together in the same cemetery. I didn't say the white Confederate soldiers. I said the white. And see, in this study, sometimes in the study of the past, we gloss over the nuances. Yeah, there were white people that wanted the abolition of slavery, but the abolition of slavery did not necessarily mean that they believed in the equality of Black and white people. And Lincoln was trying to, as late into the Civil War, he was meeting with Black leaders, help me with this, Kelly, trying to convince them, even during the Civil War, that when the war was over, we should all go to Liberia.
That's right.
Or Sierra Leone, or one of these other places. So the point I'm trying to make is, you know, I think that we should still fight for the passage, but it's on us, right? For instance, why didn't anybody say, oh, the Democratic Convention is coming. We know they're going to put together a platform that comes out of the Democratic Convention. Is anybody on the do we have anybody on the platform committee who's going to make sure that HR 40, passage of HR 40, is a part of the Democratic Party national platform? It should be, because the party can't win without Black people. And Black people, there is a transactional dimension to politics. We should get something, and not just symbolic things, and not just the appointments. We should get something that will transform the lives of people too. But at least, we should get HR 40.
I want to stay right there where you are with the Democratic Party, because to your point, so many people of color are Democrats, and we're finding that the Democratic Party tends to select the people that they want to run for elected positions. And so that was the case on the national level. Kamala has the votes. But was there anyone else that even thought about throwing their hat in? I know, Larry, you had that same issue when you were running for senator, and the presumptive nominee was already said who it should be and who it would be, in spite of the fact that there were two other candidates on the Democratic side that were wanting to run. Same thing on the local level within Congressional District 10, in that there were 13 candidates running, but there was a particular candidate who was officially endorsed by the state Democratic Party, the county Democratic Party. And so I just wanted to get your take on how do we, let's say there's someone on here right now who may not be that popular Democrat, who may not even understand in the special election for the congressional district, that the district leaders ultimately will decide who the congressperson is for that 10th district. For someone who's toying with journalism, but also is toying with the idea of becoming a public servant, how do we align ourselves with, you're either a Republican or a Democrat, and if you are, you still have to get the anointing of the Democratic machine. Do you agree with that? Is that a good thing, or is that something? Or if not, how can we change it? I know that Rosa has definitely touted third parties, but how do we shift, because we're in a season of change, of major change? Is this the time to make that change with third party? I know that was a lot that I just gave to you.
I defer to Rosa, and since I spoke already,
Okay.
Kelly, and I'll come back after Kelly.
You know, again, the apparatus of even being on the ballot, right? Like, a lot of people don't understand. Again, third parties have to, every time there's a federal vote, national vote, we have to fight to get ballot access, right? The Green Party will probably make 32 again, other parties not hear that number. So I think that's important. But I also really want journalists to talk about why in a democracy does it take $2 billion to run to be president. Like that old adage when we were like in elementary school, everybody could run for president. No, actually they can't. Okay. The second thing is, I want journalists to also, they're throwing around this $310 million that Vice President Harris has gotten, right? Then they talk about those 3-4 calls that happen: white women, white men, 44,000 Black women, 25,000 Black men, right? Those groups raised about $8 million. Where's the other 200 million coming from? Where is it? From AIPAC, from Boeing, from every corporation, unlimited money. You know, I think that's what I want to see true journalists get to, that, like, you know, there's no way. Well, let me just say this about AIPAC. AIPAC right now.
Please give the acronym.
Yes, sorry about that.
Everyone knows.
Oh God, what is the acronym? Affairs. It's a Jewish lobbying group, the very, very conservative. I'm sorry, AIPAC.
American Israel Public Affairs Committee.
Yes, that would be it. Right. AIPAC is spending about $6 million to get rid of one representative, Cori Bush. Right. And that's how they took Jamal Bowen out. AIPAC right now is going to the most progressive Congress people they see and running $1 million campaigns to get them out. Right. Cori might not make it. Jamal Bowen is out. And I think then next they're going to come for Rashida Tlaib. Right. And I would like to also, journalists, especially for young people, because I believe one of the main problems is there's really not voter education. and we just don't have that type of money. So I don't know if a third party is ever going to make it, maybe in my lifetime, I don't know. But I think we have to be very clear, like where this money is coming from, who's going to be the influence, what are the policies that we want the most. I mean, honestly, if I was like in the room as a Democratic consultant, I would say this: cancel all student loan debt, because yes, Biden has gone beyond in the best ways. First, it was $20,000, but he's being pushed by something called the debt collective that Astra Taylor started 7 years ago, where we are people like me. I'm part of the over 50 group, and there's hundreds of us who owe so much money. That could really put Harris on that. But then the flip side is I would like to see more, maybe investigative or more hard-hitting articles that are taking seriously that still about 17% of Latinos, all Latinos, are for Trump, and you still got about 8 to 9% of African American men that are for Trump. So when people ask me this, I'll stop on this point. This is what I say: if you didn't grow up in the city of New York in the 80s, like some of us did, Donald Trump was a fixture at every party, every rapper. He was a fixture because he's put out billboards and New York Times article to execute the Central Park Five, those young brothers that were railroaded, their lives destroyed. And I was thinking of it in like terms we would use in the hood or the barrio. Trump has always been that dude that's on the come up, meaning he'll align himself with anybody. And people always go, why do poor people like still vote for him? I'm like, because that's the American dream, right? Like, well, he started with nothing, which is not true. Racism through his father to keep Black and Latino people out of their real estate holdings. But there's something about him that sometimes rings true. Is inflation high? Yes. It doesn't help when Democratic or the punditry class on CNN, MSNBC, all those anchors make millions of dollars and they're like, inflation's good. Maybe inflation's not bad. Maybe not for you because you're a multimillionaire in the punditry class, but why are we paying $9 for an avocado? Why has our gas bills doubled? Well, inflation is real. So sometimes, and even he'll say DC is a swamp. Yeah, I think so too. There's this weird couple of things that he'll say that connects us to being like, all right, he's out there fighting the good fight. With all that being said, we know the truth. But look, I got like mad people in my family. All right, not my mom and my dad, but I have a lot of cousins. And there's been a lot of conversations, and there's been like, I won't be going to that family reunion. How dare you, as someone in my family, my lineage, you're Boricua, and you are coming into my mom's house with a Trump hat? Absolutely not. That's a very but there's something that he connects to. And I think it is really that people, for the most part, just feel we do everything we can. We're doing everything right. And we are just being so hit with the economy, and that journalists don't even really use the term working people, working class. After Bernie, what, did it just disappear? Because I haven't heard about that in any debate.
So she turned the corner a little bit, and I want to stay there because we all have multi-ethnic groups within our own families. And something that she said earlier that I wanted to come back to. So I want to come back to it now so that it doesn't get lost. The seeming two things: the rift that seems to be between African Americans and Latinos, and this whole notion of the hypocrisy of Trump saying what he says being received by so many, I want to say marginalized groups, but I'll use that term loosely, but so many Latinos and Black males. What is that? What is that?
It's called the
What is that?
patriarchy.
What
It's
is that?
patriarchy.
Kelly,
That's it.
Kelly, what
I,
is
I,
it?
I, I'm not convinced that she's going to win in this way. The patriarchy exists. Our reproductive rights as women were taken away. Who is going to vote? This is, for a woman. That question, everybody just assumes that people are going to vote for a woman. No. And that in one way, right? Like, I don't like when people, and I won't abide when people will talk about, like the New York Times just did an article on her pantsuits. Are we here still in 2024 talking about what a woman wears running for office, 3 pages? I want to know what her policy, I don't care what she's wearing, but I do believe, I could be wrong again, y'all, but patriarchy is real. And if I could just interject that, I don't believe there is a conflict per se between African American, Latino people with a younger generation. I think that's actually used by powers that be to be like, well, Latinos are all anti-Black. No, anyone could be anti-Black. And there are many Afro-Latino people. We're not ever in a discussion that we have in a symbiotic relationship, particularly with African American people. So for me, Caribbean people, African Americans, and Puerto Ricans, we're both these citizens, right? Like Puerto Ricans have a citizenship. Although if you live on the island, you're not allowed to vote for the president because we're a colony. But I think our relationship with African American people is the strongest because we are American citizens that continue to be second-class citizens to the system. Am I saying that there's not anti-Blackness in the Latino community? No. I just gave an example of somebody in my family who I believe is anti-Black if you're going to vote for Trump. But, I always take that with that grain of salt of divide and conquer. And I do believe a younger generation of Latinos who are really embracing themselves as Black or African descendant are doing really incredible work. But there's still a reason that we're not allowed to racialize ourselves on a census. And why is that? We've been fighting that for 25 years to be able to say, I'm a Black Puerto Rican. I'm not Black and Puerto Rican.
So Kelly, from perspective of a male perspective, the patriarchy that she spoke about and the narrative that Black men are embracing the candidacy of Trump and the hypocrisy, even with all of its hypocrisy. Are you open to weighing in on that?
Yeah, so in 2016, 14% of black male voters voted for Trump. In 2000,
what was it? You said
14%,
14%?
14%.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2020, 12% of black male voters voted for Trump in 2020. Which both numbers are higher historically than one would think for a Republican. For Republican candidate. Trump overall got more of the Black vote than any Republican candidate had in recent memory in 2020. So I think that it's the Black male vote is connected to a whole lot of stuff about males in general feeling disaffected in the political process. And what I mean by that is, and this speaks to the patriarchy that Sister Clemente was talking about, that the focus on LGBTQIA issues, particularly when we see in the Black Lives Matter movement, the focus on women as electoral voters, as important voters in holding power, that men across the spectrum, certain men, have felt disaffected in the political process. And a matter of fact, I was in a discussion just a couple of weeks ago with a barber because I wanted to know where this is coming from. This is a barber because you can tell I don't go to barbershop, but I went to this one particularly to have this discussion because he was somebody who was very critical of the Democratic Party, very embracing of some of the things Trump says, and I wanted to get a sense of what that was. And his rationale, which other men were agreeing with him, was that the Democratic Party has led to the effeminization of men. That's what he said, the effeminization of men. So again, that goes into the support for LGBTQIA issues that men are rejecting, and that the Republican Party flat out, kind of rejects. So I think that has been appealing for some people. Now, I will say that I think it's overblown in terms of how many black men are going to go vote for Trump and all. I think it's a bit overblown. One of the things, again, that the Republicans have been good at, and Trump as well, is creating a narrative that if you say it long enough, people believe it. And they're very good at that. Now, I want to circle back to something though that's very important that we can't forget. Black people really were looking at the Progressive Party in 1948 and 1952. Right? You had Coretta Scott King at there, Paul Robeson, Du Bois. They were looking at the Progressive Party in 1948 and 1952. So black people have been open to the idea of it. But we have to really sink into why the Progressive Party failed, or why it was undermined. Because there was an attempt to undermine it, because the Progressive Party also was looking at trying to reconcile with the Soviet Union at that time. Which is why you saw Paul Robeson with it. But the House of Un-American Activities Committee helped undermine people who were supporting the Progressive Party, ran people away from the Progressive Party. So we have to understand that part. We also have to understand that when Jesse Jackson ran in 1984 and 1988, Jesse Jackson said, "I'm running to save the Democratic Party so it's not taken over by conservatives." He said that in 84, right? So we have to remember that particular moment, and we have to remember that the Democratic Party in 1985 created a Democratic Leadership Council, which went further to the right, right? And again, now this is the key point. The thing that brought the Democrats back to putting systemic racism in their platform for the first time in 2020 was the power of protests. It was the protest movement that pushed the Democrats to put systemic racism for the first time in their history on their platform, right? It's the first time that all the major Democratic candidates started talking about reparations because of the power of protest. So when we look at all these different things, the different issues that they're dealing with, for us, the fundamental piece is if we have a consistent organizing, consistent protest to push them in a direction, then we can be successful, right? But that's the thing I'm afraid with Kamala. We're celebrating her and not pushing. And that's the thing. That's what we did with Obama. Yep. We celebrated Obama, but we got to remember to push. We got to remember that protest piece. And I think that's what Brother Hamm spoke about earlier. The things that we want to see on their platform, we have to protest and organize and push for. That's the only way we're going to move them further to the left, because if we don't, they won't move that way.
So I guess my question then becomes, and I circled back to it, in terms of the Democratic Party, how do we hold them accountable to what you just said, Kelly? How do we get an agenda of policy that we can all embrace on the agenda? To what you said, that there should be some questions on there, or some positions on the national platform that probably are not. How do we get to the policy and beyond the performance part of it? How do we do that? If it's not a third party, how do we do that?
Well, first you got to get.
How do we do it now?
We got to deal with the Negro gatekeepers in the Democratic Party that block stuff.
Okay,
I'll come back to that later.
Yep.
Could I jump in?
Sure.
Can I jump in? Okay. First of all, I want to go back to the mention about Black men and say this, that we got to be careful. I'm very concerned that Black men's voting is yet being used as another tactic to demonize Black men in this society. I mean, I'm glad Dr. Harris brought out some statistics that in 2016, 14% of Black men voted for Trump, and in 2020, 12%. So that was a decrease. But just consider this. If in Black women, I believe, were the highest percentage-wise demographic that voted Democratic. It was over 90 something percent, maybe close to 90. Was it 93 to 95%, Dr. Harris? I believe
It was
Black
98,
women.
then it was 95.
98,
Yeah.
yeah, it was
Right.
98.
Okay. After Black women were Black men. No other demographic. All the other demographics voted in higher numbers for Trump than Black men. Black men were number 2. And we're talking, I keep hearing this discussion over and over again about the Black men for Trump, and that is 12%. That makes us the number 2 demographic. Are you going to abandon Black men because they voted 88% for Democrats and not 98% for Democrats? I think we should start. I think we got to be careful. And tactically, this is not to gloss over the oppression of Black women, the triple oppression, race, sex, and class. But if we're not careful, we're going to put ourselves in a dynamic of pitting Black men against Black women. And I don't think that that would redound to our benefit. I think we need a higher level of unity among Black people. So I just think we got, Black men were number 2. The number.
That's flipping the narrative. That's
the second most reliable group. I mean,
but that's not what people are talking about. Look,
no, but it's the way it sounds. It's the perception. I know that. And let me finish because I gave deference to everyone else. I did not interrupt anyone else. And you can refute and rebuke me in your remarks. I just think it's something I'm hearing over and over and over again. And it can give some, I'm not even saying gives all, but it gives some the perception that somehow, once again, Black men are unreliable. We can't count on them. They might all go vote for Trump. And that's not true. Rather than saying 12% of Black men or 14% of Black men voted for Trump, why don't we say 86% of Black men voted for the Democratic candidate, or 88% of Black men? Why do we use the minor figure and not the major figure? I'm just saying, not a big deal for me, but I can't gloss over it because it's part of a reality that I come into contact with. I think Kamala Harris can win. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. She beat Donald Trump by 3 million votes. Now, albeit she was a white woman, and race is a thing, but I think Kamala Harris I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not trying to make a prediction here. I'm just trying to make a projection based on the fact that Hillary Clinton did win the popular vote. It presents the possibility that a woman could possibly win in 2024. And Hillary Clinton perhaps lost the electoral vote because she did not campaign sufficiently in several of the battleground states, Pennsylvania being one of them. And had she done so, perhaps the outcome would have been different. I think Kamala Harris does have a chance. I'm just speaking facts here. There's a lot of excitement in the Black community for Kamala Harris. Mm-hmm. And she already has the votes. They did I think an informal or unofficial roll call of delegates, which they will have to repeat at the convention, I believe. But she has a sufficient number of votes to get the nomination. So I think it is possible. But again, my concern is policy. I do not believe that Kamala Harris's policy on Gaza is going to be substantially different from that of the Biden administration. And if it is different, it will be because the people in the streets have created the pressure necessary to make that policy move in a different direction. And I think that's, we always have to kind of put that in the mix. I believe that Donald Trump must be defeated. Trump represents a fascist movement in this country, unlike any that we have seen in contemporary period. Has fascism always existed? Yes. One could make an argument fascism goes all the way back to slavery, that Black people have lived under fascist conditions all of our lives in the United States of America. But the open embrace of the Republican Party by the fascists, neo-fascists, Confederates, neo-Confederates, Nazis, neo-Nazis, and racists of all other stripes, make it clear that now is a movement that has a political party, and their leader at the moment is Donald Trump. And, not to leave out the most important point, they tried to overthrow the United States government, and they tried to do it violently. And they will try to do it again, either violently or non-violently. I think one of the discussions that needs to be had, not today, we don't have time, but what are we going to do after November 5th? Because if Trump has already made it clear, he's not going to accept defeat. And what he'll probably do is the same thing Bush did. He'll take his defeat to the Supreme Court and get that Supreme Court, half of the majority of which he personally appointed members to that court, to try to overturn the election. And what are we going to do about that? I mean, are we prepared for that? I mean, are we prepared for any kind of major violence that might take place? And I think there will be violence. At what scale, I don't know. But these people are going to use any means necessary to seize power. Their objective is white minority rule. That's what they try. They don't care that white people, that's why they're obsessed with race, because they know, if not already, I mean, according to the statistics, they're using like 2035, when people of color will be the majority. We might already be the majority. They're just not counting us right, or refusing to give us the right signatures. And they know that. And they want to seize power. And they're going to try to seize power. So, this is why I think that there has to be progressive elements struggling within the Democratic Party. That's what Bernie Sanders represented. And I think that was his contribution. What he was able to show with his election in 2016 was, in fact, that there is a constituency of millions for a progressive platform and a progressive candidate. And that's why they worked so hard to get him out of the election in 2020. I thought he should have kept running and run through the up to the Democratic convention, but he wrapped his campaign up. I think it was late April or early May, sometime in there.
Larry, I need to insert here, because we have had a very productive conversation and we are coming at our end. And so before we just have to get off, I want each of you to be able to have an opportunity to make a closing statement. But before we do that, I just want to say to the journalists and to the community activists, what has been presented here, so that just a recap. So we talked about stopping the fear mongering. We talked about focusing on policy and not personality. We talked about the need for a massive voter registration, education, and get out the vote to offset the purging that is happening. We talked about, which is very appropriate for this space, an independent media amplified. We talked about that. We talked about that particular media having the tools of investigative and hard-hitting stories. We talked about the use of social media to offset misinformation, being mindful of how we craft stories. The hard-hitting stories have to be crafted so that it is not buying into a mainstream narrative that's already in play, like looking at 12% of the Black men as opposed to 88% of the Black men voting. And then we talked about progressives needing to be within, having voices within the Democratic Party. I would venture to say within the Republican Party too, but that's just my own personal insert. A platform and candidate. Those are the things, those are the takeaways that these dynamic people just gave to us this morning, this afternoon now. And hopefully they have pricked your consciousness to get you to think about the roles that each of you can play, because we each can play a role, no matter where we are. No matter, we're thinking that we need to play a big role. Sometimes it's the little role. Sometimes it's all of us doing a little bit. So I would like to ask each of our panelists, first of all, I would like to thank you for this conversation. This is what is not on MSNBC, but needs to be, right? Because there needs to be more than going along with what the Democratic Party says on one station, going along with what the Republican Party says on another station, and nothing else to get our thinking to be provoked for us to think about more. So I just want to thank you. I want to thank Amplified for putting this together. And they have already said, they've already asked me to ask you to come back for a part 2 of this conversation. So what I would like to do is I would like to ask each of you to bring closing remarks. I'm going to start with Kelly Harris, and just be mindful that each of you is strong and we need a closing remark from each of you, okay?
Yeah, I see Josie just said 30 seconds, so I will. Don't count this. This ain't my 30 seconds.
Right, no, that's not it. No,
that's just a prelude.
No, a minute. Okay. But that's part of the issue too, that we get those quick sound bites and we can't say anything, so we perform. Okay.
Yeah. So one, thank you again for this discussion. I enjoyed it. 2, I think that we need to work to, one of the things that we need to work for, because oftentimes we talk about reparations, which is extremely important. Oftentimes we talk about education. And the attack on Africana studies in AP classes throughout education throughout the country. That's very important, that we need to fight for. But we also need to fight to have Citizens United repealed. And we need to fight to get the money out of politics. So we can have more voices and more people in politics. So I think that should be a part of our voter education. That should be a part of our organizing. We need to amplify that to get all this money out of politics, because it's killing us.
Thank you. Rosa?
I'll be quick, but I just want to say this. My generation of men, when I was talking about, when Kelly was bringing up specific issues, that's our generation, the hip hop generation of men. That us who've been in the culture and have been pushed out of it, us as women who've been violently harassed, dissed, and all of that stuff, because a new generation, right? As movement people came out and were very clear, they were done with the gender binary. They were done with toxic manhood, right? And there's so many examples of my men in my generation, the hip hop generation. I don't even tell people the names, okay? And next week will be the 10th year of Ferguson. We went from Ferguson organizing to now no national movement, completely canceling everybody in their own corner. So I believe that the strongest people are going to be those that organize locally. Like, what does that mean for you in your hood, in this? Because I'm really thankful for Gen Z. I'm thankful that my daughter's like, Mom, that's patriarchal and you're a woman. I'm thankful that my daughter will be like, Daddy has more feminist tendencies than you, Mom. Yes, because this generation has been very clear that they don't want flyover activists, multimillionaires coming in, and foundations. And I would urge everybody next week to see what's going on in Ferguson. A community that was abandoned, with 4 of the men who led those protests killed, died under suspicious circumstances. And when you talk to the people in Ferguson, they're done. They're tired. They don't want anybody coming there next week, but that's not going to happen. So I just, for me, it's not about pitting Black men, against Black women, Latino men against Latino women. It's that the new generation's like, yo, we're not dealing with this anymore. We're done. We're not going to be in spaces and be afraid anymore. And if you're not going to respect my gender binary, if you're going to be transphobic and all these toxic manhood, we don't want you in those spaces. I don't speak for Gen Z. I mean, I'm 52, but I think I really work with enough young people for them to say, it's not wrong to say these things. And also for the men, the younger men in the generation that have no problem saying, we support women. We don't always have to be out there. The women should be on the front lines. I think that's something really incredible that this generation has given us and how we move forward in organizing a movement.
Thank you, Larry. And I have to apologize to the students who are on here because I needed to give you time, right? And so I'm going to get at least one or two questions answered before we get off this. Okay, Larry.
It's only 90 days until November 5th. So once again, I'll just reiterate what I said earlier. We need massive voter registration. And if people want to help with voter registration, POP is doing voter registration today on the corner of Broad Market Street, downtown Newark, right in front of 777 Broad Street. We'll be there from 3 to 5. So come down and help us register our people to vote. We'll be registering every Saturday from now until the cutoff date, which Deborah, you said was October 15th.
Yes. Okay. All right. Thank you. Now, Josie, you have students who have questions. I know there's been, for those, there's been a flurry of chatter in our chat box. So I am going to ask who I see. I see Zoe. Zoe, do you have a question?
I did have one. So I know we spoke a lot about third parties and how much the press pushes them out and stuff, but I think it's also important we recognize like just how large the duopoly we have is. And so with such little time until the national elections, I was wondering if the panelists think it's to our benefit or to our detriment that we speak out against the very undemocratic means by which Kamala Harris has essentially been made the Democratic nominee.
So we're
I'm
going
a
to
third-party person. I'm voting for Cornel West and Melina Abdullah, and I'm not ashamed of that. I'm not, because when I ran those 5 years after, me and Cynthia were completely castigated by our own people. We couldn't work, we couldn't get jobs, and now 16 years later, I hear young people saying, oh my God, I didn't even know that, or I believe in that. So around the duopoly, it's not that the third parties, it's not that the media is pushing it, is that the only time they push it is to say that if Harris loses, it's because of third parties. That's not how voting works. If Harris wins, it's 6 states, right? Or let's just even look at the last election. In Michigan, 44,000 people went in that ballot. They didn't vote for Hillary Clinton, but they voted Democrat down. And I think what the Palestinian people and are teaching us is that you can have like a strategic thing that you do with that. But do I believe that third parties are being covered? No. I mean, right now, people are like mad at Dr. West and Melina for what? Having a democratic democracy? What democracy only has 2 parties? That's not a democracy to me,
Dr. Harris.
Well, I think there's a long-term strategy clearly to get beyond the duopoly. I think that's needed. But I think presently, I think that, and I know this word has been overused, but I think that Trump does pose an existential threat to the liberal democracy that we have in this country. And please, we have problems with American democracy. It's a limited form of democracy. I know that. So we really have to work to clearly to transform this country in every way, shape, and form. However, I think that it's too much at stake to lose, particularly when we see what Trump did with the Supreme Court, we're with that court for another 10 years at least. And he may be able to put more people on there if he wins again. And I think that people really, really need to realize how important the Supreme Court is, and other federal judges are in our body politics. So yeah, it's a duopoly. We had to fight it. It's a long-term strategy. But I think sometimes that given what's at stake, we can't let this dude get in again.
Larry.
To answer Zoe's question directly, should you point out the undemocratic nature of the democratic process? The answer is yes. You should always try to present an accurate as possible picture of what's going on. So yes, and that could be a whole nother program, but I'm answering your question, yes. At the same time, I agree with Dr. Harris that, and I'm going to put it in another way. The Republicans must be defeated. They must be defeated soundly. It must be a rebuke. They must lose the electoral vote and the popular vote. So there's no question whatsoever that people are rejecting fascism, because that's what we're faced with. I mean, look at their platforms. First of all, look at they did have a platform, unlike 20. They came out with a 16-page platform from the Republican National Convention. Look at that. Look at Trump's plan, which is Agenda 47. Look at Project 2025, although not authored by Trump. The preface is written by his vice president, J.D. Vance. Project 2025 is produced by the Heritage Foundation. And although it's not the official Trump document, you can see elements of Trump's Agenda 47 in Project 2025. Look at the decisions that just came out of the Supreme Court. And on the question of third parties, I support people's right to form third parties and to run third party candidates. That's democracy. And if the Democrats lose, it's not going to be because of third parties, because they didn't offer a program that people thought was the program they wanted. I mean, you can't speak of competition in the marketplace and then no competition in the political arena. So again, register, vote. If you're already registered, check your voter registration. Make sure it's right. Don't have no surprises on election day. Get your family and your friends. You ain't got to stand out on the street corner like us. Get the people in your family to get registered. Everybody get registered, and struggle politely with people who say we shouldn't vote. Struggle with them. Don't try to I got to win this argument. Present an alternative argument to give them some food for thought.
And on that note, I think part two, Josie, if you are open to it, and Todd, that our part two is questions from the community, all questions, but based on what Larry just said and Kelly and Rosa, that is the perfect segue to close out this program and to give people, I think that we have provided a buffet of thought for you to feast on, and to have this conversation with your friends, have this conversation with, it's what Larry just said, talk to people who have a difference of opinion. You don't have to win, but we can prick the consciousness and not just go along to get along. So I want to again thank Josie, and we are very appreciative, and Public Square Amplified is one of those independent medias, the outlet that we were talking about. And so continue to follow Amplified, and you can and definitely continue to listen to WBAI so that you can hear things to offset the controlling narratives of the mainstream. So with that, I turn this over to Josie Gonzalez.
Sure.
Gonzalez.
I hope Todd is still here, and I want to thank everyone. I want to thank everyone for showing up, for going over time. Today was just amazing. Todd Stephen Burrows, kudos to you. Todd is our senior editorial advisor, and he's leading our second year of our community journalism program. It has been an outstanding year. Zoe has been in both years, and I think Zoe can sort of testify that we're evolving and we're growing and we're deepening our commitment to emancipatory journalism. A lot of what we are struggling with is how do we cover the contradictions that get us to hold on to democracy, right? Because the press must struggle with those contradictions. I see Andy Richards, who's an advisory committee member of Public Square Amplified. Thank you, Andy, for showing up. Thank you all so much. Please, independent media is so critical to our democracy because we're losing our democracy every single day. When you don't show up in spaces, when you're too afraid to post a question, when you don't have spaces to publish. We say that Public Square Amplified is a space for community members to publish their stories because more and more, the working class students, immigrants are being pushed to the periphery, pushed to the margins and relying on social media. And let me repeat, 10 corporations own media and press. There's no longer, this is press and this is media. It's a struggle for independent organizations. We're struggling against algorithms that are feeding us propaganda that we internalize. And so a lot of what you hear today is about propaganda, meaning what we're struggling with and questions that we're posing. So I want Todd to say a few words about what it's been like for Public Square Amplified. I want everyone to follow us on social media. I want everyone to read our stories and share our stories. I want everyone to support us. We're independent media, we're community media. We love it when Larry Hamm says we're pop media. We struggle for writers and editors, really struggle for writers and editors. And so when Todd says I work 80 hours, it's because we're struggling for writers and editors. And when Todd says this is not what I signed up for, he knows that we're struggling just to get content out. So I want to thank you. It means so much on behalf of all of the participants, all the community participants in our community journalism class. We're going to have an event next Saturday. You guys can drop by. Everyone here is invited. Chairman Hamm will be there. We're giving his book to every one of the members of the class, and he'll sign it for them. We're also giving a book published by Todd Stephen Burrows, and he will also autograph that book. So we just thank you so much for supporting us. And Todd, why don't you serenade us out with your spinny hat?
No, we're over time.
Go.
As I see on TV, we've run out of time. So thanks everyone, and we're gonna have to do this again.
Definitely.
Hope you all be back.
Yes. Thank you.